With Elena in a dark mood, the island gives somebody perhaps one of the darkest fantasies we've seen yet. And as this happens, Helene bonds with another guest who acts as a long overdue wake up call for herself. So, on the first topic, let's talk about Helene and her situation, which is pretty much thanks to Ruby, she now has a job as a bartender, but it still seems that Helene is very much stuck on what life was like with her mom and hasn't really started to move forward. Yes, when it comes to Javier, she's now starting to make some kind of relationship, but it's not really pressing on her that she can't just kind of waver through the island and just be on pause forever. Which makes her meeting Isaiah while she's bartending a very good thing, since Isaiah's a guest whose fantasy is learning when he dies, because with Isaiah thinking about starting a family with a woman that he likes, he wants to know when he dies because his father died when he was pretty young and he doesn't want to put a kid through that. But thanks to Helene, who, as we saw before, kind of has the ability to maybe help people through their fantasies, she gets him to just think about living life and never mind when he's gonna die. And with that in mind, she realizes that she too needs to start living her life rather than just thinking about how things were when her mom was alive, or even trying to tether herself to Javier, aka Dadvier, and trying to siphon off him in order to have some type of life for herself. The second topic goes into Amber and her family, which consists of a husband named Dan, her daughter named Riley, and son named Trevor. And Amber's fantasy is that she wants to have her family be as happy as they look on social media, but being that social media is fake, it leads to her having this very disturbing fantasy where her real family's truck stuck in some kind of mirror world, while this fake family who's all happy and smiles, they're in the real world, and it freaks her out a lot. And Elena, alongside the island, decide to just let it get creepier and creepier until eventually Amber has to be her own savior. And that means Amber facing all the reasons why she wants to have a perfect family, which includes her having a very sordid, impoverished childhood, her wanting Riley to continue tennis because she so badly wanted to do tennis when she was young and even found a racket found in the trash, but her parents wouldn't support her. And it just goes on and on and on. And because her kids, and even Dan perhaps, didn't know how bad things were, they never fully understood why Amber was so into them having family time, taking pictures and stuff like that. But with her forced to open up to them in a rather uncomfortable way, now they understand and they're more open to, and even willing to take the initiative to do the type of things that make Amber feel happy and not just focusing on what makes them happy. So the final topic is dealing with Elena in the aftermath of her breaking up with Javier, which is point blank, she devolves a little bit. With her and Javier breaking up, she starts putting her walls back up. When Ruby starts asking her questions, she reminds her in some ways that she's the boss, she's an associate, employee, however you want to look at it, and maybe she, let things go too far. And at first, Ruby's a little bit offended, but at the same time, Ruby is a 75-year-old woman who raised kids, had grandkids, lived a whole life, so she quickly clocks what's going on. And while she makes it very clear she is not happy with the way that Elena's handling things, at the same time, she doesn't get long-term angry because she knows how Elena is at this point. And honestly, that's for the best, because after a certain point, especially with Elena seeing what Amber was going through, and maybe to a point understanding Isaiah's situation, she relents. She doesn't relent in terms of Javier and them breaking up, but she does relent on being so hard and rough with Ruby, since while there's still pain involved with feeling like she needed to break up with Javier, at the same time, she doesn't want to go fully back to the way that she used to be. Her relationship with Ruby has given her so much in terms of friendship that she didn't really have before, that she doesn't want to throw that away just because she got to a new place in life that was very uncomfortable and she decided she needed to retreat to some place that felt more familiar. So the first highlight for us is that when it comes to Helene, I feel like she's not only beginning to move on, but also starting to show ways that she could become an asset. The first way that she's doing that is As we saw when she was initially introduced, she has a certain way with guests that could very well mean that her being a bartender might be perfect for her. It may be, considering how Ruby seems to be guided by the island just like Elena, maybe there might come a time when, I won't say that she's going to become Ruby's subordinate or anything, but she can start to show us how each member of the island, beyond Elena and Ruby, have some type of role to play in order for guests to become their whole selves or get what they need beyond the fantasy. And then when it comes to Javier, I feel like when it comes to Javier and Helene's relationship, it allows for something that we can't get for either one of them out of a romantic relationship. Javier, I would say, is kind of closed off in the same ways that we see Elena's closed off. But with Helene, with him having to be open up and vulnerable with her because that's his daughter, he has the type of complications where I don't think he can retreat as easily as Elena was able to retreat with him. So he has to stay open. He has to keep trying. And I think that's going to really allow him and also Helene to become fuller people and better characters, especially when it comes to the long term of who they can be in terms of in service to the island, in service to each other, people they're platonic with, and their eventual love interest. The second highlight for us is just how Elena and the island kind of went to the dark side this episode. And probably in every single recap we have mentioned that there's something dark and kind of murky when it comes to the island and the island magic. And sometimes it's hard to say whether when Elaine is tapping into that magic, if she's in control or the island's in control, because it's hard to say who's the more powerful one. When we talk about Elena's family, it often seems that when it comes to her and her uncle, they were able to channel the magic and do what they need to do in some type of therapist, psychologist kind of way. But as we've seen in this episode, with Elena being in a bad mood because of Javier, things took a darker turn for Amber in ways that I wouldn't necessarily say that she needed to go through to that extent. So with that in mind, it does make me wonder, as we go into the third highlight, could this lead to them talking about Fernando? And the reason we bring up Fernando is Segundo locks away somebody or something in the 12th resort room. And we haven't heard about Elena's cousin since season 1, episode 8, who was the host before she took over. So in my mind, since we don't know what happened to Fernando fully, maybe he's a dark force or something that's locked away in that room right now. And maybe we finally may follow up on that, since we are at episode 7. In episode 8 of last season's when he was a bit more introduced in terms of his story. So maybe it's time to follow up as we build toward the season finale. Which leads to the on the fence topic, which is, well, to be fair, Elena has come very far since the year or so that Ruby showed up. And for her to kind of take a step back and kind of reflect on whether or not she likes being this open, vulnerable, and mushy, in a way, it's understandable. She lived a very closed off and reserved life, and having to stumble and fall on her face in that Groundhog Day scenario multiple times, even get told off by Helene, that probably hurt more than we realize. And I mean, we did see Elena cry, which is a very rare thing, and that's considering all the different stories she has heard or seen when it comes to these different guests and all that they've been through. So I want to give Elena grace, but at the same time, I do wonder how they're going to handle Elena eventually getting back to where she was and then surpassing where she was. Is it going to be a quick and easy thing where with her forgiving Ruby, we should maybe expect her to maybe move on with Javier, either romantically or back to friends by episode 10? Or is it a case where they're going to really dive deep into Elena's various issues, maybe or maybe not, including Fernando and the rest of her family, and not being fully sure if they're going to take the long road or take the short road is what's leaving us a bit on the fence of how they're going to handle Elena's storyline going forward. So overall, we're very interested in where Fantasy Island goes next, since with the way that the island was reacting off of Elena, or Elena out for the island, we got to see a bit of a darkness. But at the same time, we also got to see Helene get ready for her next chapter, and with Javier no longer tethered to Elena and now really focused on Helene, it's going to be interesting to see if she becomes a catalyst for his growth as much as he might be a catalyst for her growth. and whether or not Ruby may get left behind, or if she, with Isla or whoever, may continue to evolve into something that you can see has long-term potential rather than has a short-term spark.